the back here, the first door on the left and the third door on the left is another restroom. They're unisex, so one's full, the other. In case of emergency, this is your exit door. If you're in the back there, use the one you came in on, okay? Go ahead. But this morning we're going to talk about, this is kind of your schedule for today. It's written on the board over here too if you get lost. Next slide. Okay, we're going to talk about personal protective equipment. This is the equipment you got yesterday, the vests, goggles, gloves, hard hat, and you're going to, you're required to wear hard-soled shoes and steel toes along with that. Your PPE is mandatory, it's not an option. Okay? You're required to wear it every day while you're out there working. And just as we talked a little bit yesterday, there's eyes all around. And if somebody sees you without your personal protective equipment, they're going to report you to somebody. Okay? And if it gets back to us, it's not going to be good because it's mandatory you wear it. Each operation and job assignment has a activity hazard analysis. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. You guys need to become familiar with the grounds maintenance AHA. Okay, we keep them on site. They have to be signed by every one of you that you've read it. Become familiar with it. It tells you exactly what hazards to look for. Because we've already done the analysis of what could happen to you during weed trimming, mowing, any of that, and the PPE required for each job. So read the AHA, become familiar with it. Each time you get a task order that's outside the scope of normal grounds maintenance, tree removal, fence line clearing, those kind of things, there's going to be an AHA. Each time there's an AHA written, it's going to require a signature. It's going to require some kind of a safety training that you've read that AHA and you understand the risks and the hazards that are going to be associated with that task order. And the reason they do that is, as Chris mentioned, is if there's an accident, that's the first thing they're going to look for. And I can tell you that our PAR, when he comes out and he looks at the operation, he's going to look for that AHA.
Excuse me, Mom. What does PAR stand for?
PAR is the Professional Assessment Rep. Okay. He's our rep, okay? And he assesses what we do, okay, and how we do it. And it's kind of an annual evaluation of us.
Okay.
He can recommend that we can't renew our contract. He can recommend that.
Okay.
He determines whether we're doing our job safely, correctly, and they're getting the big bang for their buck. Okay. They also assign us new work. So when we say PAR, just remember he's our boss. Okay. And that happens to be Dave Vieser right now. He's filling in for Kelly, who is out right now, but she's been out for quite a while. Dave's been doing this a while. He's also the boss contractor, and those are the guys on the base you see run around, Chugach or Wolf Creek. You'll see them in their trucks. Skookum eventually is going to take that job in October, so these guys are kind of on their last leg. Okay, and again, that comes from the PAR. Okay, through this process, appropriate PPE is identified for each job, as I mentioned, and the required PPE is at each job site. If you're required steel-toed shoes, there's only a couple contracts that we require it. One is shelf stocking, the other's grounds. And that's, again, we'll issue, if you guys are required to buy the shoes, we'll give you a $50 up to $50 reimbursement. If your shoes cost $200, only gonna get $50, okay? So, choose your footwear, but make sure that you don't pick something that's gonna fall apart on you in a month or two, because you've already bought your shoes for this year and you're not gonna get another reimbursement till next year. Okay, it's once a year. So make sure that you buy good shoes. If you continually fail to wear your PPE, in other words, somebody calls in and says they caught you without your sound attenuators or goggles, and you're out trimming, you can receive disciplinary action up to and including possible termination of equipment, of employment, I'm sorry. If you fail to wear the designated in the performance of your assigned duty and you're injured because of the absence of the PPE, it can result in disciplinary action. We had mowers a few years ago, it's been 10, 12 years ago, out doing their thing, mowing, and the sound attenuators were up here and not down here, okay? And OSHA happened to catch them. That's Occupational Safety and Health folks, and they don't have a sense of humor when it comes to that. We got fined for that. So be sure that when you're doing, if you take a break and you got the sound attenuators back up here, that when you get started again, they're back down here, because we don't want any infractions. Okay? Lynn, did you have something, or were you just scratching? Okay. Any questions on PPE? Jerry?
On the mowers and some of the equipment we have to wear the double ear protection.
Yes, and next Monday, everybody's gonna be in here again at 9 o'clock, and we're going to do hearing conservation. We're gonna do hearing tests to get a baseline of where your hearing is now, and then every year you're going to be going through this get a hearing test every year to see if you're losing your hearing, okay, and how much. Because it's required by law that if you're in a job that you're above 85 decibels for a constant, almost 6 to 8 hours a day, that we have hearing conservation, and we have these hearing tests, because we want to, again, we want to make sure that you're working safely and that we're not causing damage to there. I spent time in the Navy, and when we first came in, I worked around recips, and sound attenuators were required, but I didn't wear them. I wore them on my head, up here, not down here. And I lost my low frequency hearing with recips. Jets, when I got around jets, at the time, sound attenuators were required. I wore the sound attenuators, but my high frequency went. Nowadays, when you're working around jets, it's double hearing protection. It wasn't double hearing protection when I worked around jets. So, and there's a reason it's double hearing now, is because so many of us lost our hearing due to the jet noise. So now it's double hearing protection. They've just lowered the frequency for high and low frequency. Used to be anything above 104, you had to have double hearing protection. As of last year, they dropped it down to 95. Anything above 95 has to have double hearing protection. Reason is, around the region we use a lot of chainsaws. Chainsaws are above 95. Okay, so double hearing protection is required. Some of these tractors are above 95 decibels. So you'll have to wear double hearing protection on your tractors. Okay, you have to be aware of what's going around, because you may not hear it with that double hearing protection, but you still have to operate your equipment, and you still have to be aware of what's around you. Okay, any other questions on hearing protection? Okay, we're going to talk about asbestos awareness. And the reason we have to talk about this is because these buildings have asbestos in them. 206 probably still has a lot of asbestos in it. Some of the older buildings have asbestos in it. And the reason we have to be aware of it and talk about it is because you guys are out picking up debris. Some of the siding, roofing of these older buildings is asbestos. Somebody's got to pick it up. Okay. We can only pick up a 1 by 12 inch piece of asbestos. Okay. So if there's something bigger than that, we don't pick it up. If you're on debris, you leave it alone. If you suspect it being asbestos, if you're not sure, call your supervisor. And if he's not sure, you call me, I'll get a hold of environmental. They will check it or have it checked before you touch it, okay? Don't go near it, stay away from it if you suspect it's asbestos. There's 2 types of asbestos. One is friable, okay? If you can take a 1 inch piece of, a 1 by 1 inch piece of asbestos material between your thumb and your forefinger, and you can reduce it to a powder, it's friable. That's the nasty stuff. That's the stuff that causes asbestosis, lung cancer, and mesothelioma. Okay? That's the bad stuff. The non-friable is anything that you can't reduce to a powder between your thumb and your forefinger. The base has removed most of the asbestos-containing material on the pipeline that you guys are going to be edging around on the base. You'll see it when you get out there. That is a fiberglass with a covering over it. It is not asbestos. You might think it is, it's not. They have removed it all. The buildings, though, still have it inside, some of it outside. So just be aware. And the reason I say this is the environmental guy who is in charge of asbestos awareness and abatement, he'll come around and he'll stop one of you and he'll say, have you had asbestos awareness training? You shake your head this way, because that's what, if you get anything out of this lesson this morning, that's what you want us to say. Because we're only making you aware that there's asbestos containing material on the base. You're not going to be required to handle it. You're not going to be required to abate it, which means pull it out, because you have to have special moon suits and stuff to be able to do that. All you guys are just be aware that there's asbestos containing material in the building. Okay, that's all we're going to do. And so we're going to watch this short video on asbestos, and it's going to talk about flooring, siding, roofing material, pipes, and just be aware that the buildings that you're in on the base, if you go in the buildings, have asbestos containing material. Okay, go ahead and click on that.
Asbestos. We've all heard a lot about it, but what exactly is asbestos? Asbestos is a mineral with some unusual characteristics. Asbestos has so many positive qualities that some people call it a miracle material. It is fireproof, heat resistant, lightweight, resistant to most chemicals, bacteria resistant, sound absorbing, and it doesn't conduct electricity. Products that contain asbestos can be very helpful, but they can also be very harmful. Asbestos has hidden dangers that you need to know about. While most rocks break down into tiny particles like grains of sand, asbestos breaks down into small fibers like strands of rope. These fibers can be so small that they're invisible to the human eye. In fact, you would need a very powerful microscope to see them. But even though asbestos fibers are tiny, they have the strength of steel. One of the problems in dealing with asbestos fibers is that you can't see them, taste them, or smell them. But they are there, and if the fibers enter your body, they can cause severe damage. Before the dangers of asbestos were fully known, asbestos was used throughout the building and construction industry. It was mixed into plaster and wallboard for strength and support, sprayed onto walls, ceilings, and steel girders for fireproofing, wrapped around pipes, boilers, heating ducts, and other utility systems for insulation. You can even find asbestos in floor and ceiling tiles. So if you're a member of a custodial, engineering, or maintenance staff, you need to know about the hazards of working around asbestos. In fact, the hazards of asbestos fibers are so serious that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, has issued a standard to train, monitor, and protect workers who could be exposed to asbestos on the job. As a part of this training, you will learn the health effects and risks of long-term asbestos exposure, how to recognize and deal with possible asbestos hazards.
Considering how dangerous asbestos is, and the fact that we may come in contact with it in many ways, how can we limit our exposure? First, you should know where asbestos is located in your workplace. Then, you need to keep track of the condition of all asbestos materials you encounter. And finally, remember not to disturb materials that may contain asbestos unless absolutely necessary, and then only if you have the proper training and equipment. Let's take a closer look at the first step: know where asbestos is in your workplace. Remember, asbestos has been used in many different kinds of building materials. Thermal system insulation has been the most common use. In buildings built before 1980, the heating system, boiler, utility pipes, and ductwork may be covered with insulation that contains asbestos. Asbestos can also be found above some drop ceilings in sprayed-on soundproofing and fireproofing materials. Some types of composite materials, such as plaster, wallboard, and paneling, contain asbestos fibers because they add strength but are still lightweight. Asbestos can also be found in some types of floor tiles and ceiling tiles installed before 1980. Your facility has an asbestos management plan that lists the locations of materials that contain asbestos. This is the first place you should look for this kind of information.